Okay. Screen share. Okay. We're ready to go. Okay, welcome. Good afternoon. This is Tony Trongone, Superintendent of Millville Public Schools, and we're here to provide you with an update and an information session regarding the reopening of schools for September. I'm going to have a PowerPoint to start off. So I want to talk about the purpose of the live stream. So the purpose of the live stream is to provide our community with communication regarding what's been being done between really from June up until this date. And so the information presented today is formative. And what I mean by formative is it's subject to change. And if you've been involved in education, or you have a child in education, or you're an educator, you know that things have been changing on a daily, weekly basis. And so, a matter of fact, the governor just came out with another some word about an hour ago regarding remote instruction. So I'll be adding that to this presentation. That being said, but also not only the changes from the state and from the Department of Ed, but from you. And we want to listen to what our folks have to say in the community and take that as we go back and then revise what we have and move forward with a plan. So, introductions. I'm going to have questions for our administrative staff. So I'm going to welcome Dr. Pamela Moore, our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, Mrs. Donna Myers, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Mr. Rich Davidson, our Business Administrator, Mr. Steve Matus, our Executive Director of Special Ed, Mr. Dan Wright, our Chief Information Officer for Technology, and then Mr. Ryan Cruzan, our Facilities Manager. Welcome, folks. And just for some more information, the format of today's live stream session will be questions from me to the staff, because I'm new and I'm learning. I've been here this is my third week. I don't know everything about Millville, so I'm going to be asking our folks what the plan is. And I do know a certain level of detail, but not to the detail that our outstanding folks that we're going to be asking questions to know. Then we'll have a response from our community input form that we brought out last week. There's some questions that we've added relative to the response we had from the community input form from last week, and that's going to take about an hour. And then we'll have questions from a chat to the staff, and that'll be on the right-hand margin there. We'll give about 10 minutes, and then we'll close. And some more information: the live stream is being recorded and will be placed on our district website afterwards for those who could not make it at 2 o'clock today. So we're going to review the plan at our August 3rd Board of Ed meeting, and then submit the plan to the county office sometime before August 14th. A little bit of information. I want to preface some information before we get started. So back on June 26th, the Department of Education brought forth a document called the Road Back, Restart, and Recovery Plan for Education. And it calls for 3 scenarios for schools to have a plan for: normal operations. Then there is what's called hybrid operations, and Dr. Moore will explain further in the Q&A session. And then remote learning, no in-person instruction. And then in the press conference, Governor Murphy stated that schools will open for instruction and operations in some capacity. So that's part of the mandate, that we will be open in September. That's of July 20th. That's the directive from the Department of Education and from the governor's office. And some considerations. So now people in education are looking what's going to be the best scenario for our kids to learn in. And so the first consideration obviously is health and safety. And all the districts in New Jersey have been communicating that that's the #1 priority. And so that first consideration is health and safety, making our students and staff feel safe as the primary factor in our decisions. The next consideration is social distance. And we're getting guidance from the state, from the CDC, and other health organizations. and they provided social distancing guidance, mask wearing recommendations, and other protocols and procedures to address the social distance needed in schools. And these recommendations were factored also into our decision of the hybrid model. So for instance, people have been saying we want all the kids back every day. And so this is a real simple model of a classroom with 24 students in it. And obviously you can see we could not physically fit 24 students in a classroom and then adhere to the social distance guidelines of 6 feet. And even if we had more space, it would have to double our capacity with teachers in classrooms. So abiding by the social distance guidelines of 6 foot, you can see that we can have about 50% of our students back and fall within the guidelines of the social distance parameter of 6 feet. And then the other class will go in the other day. And so that you can see that we just physically cannot fit kids in a typical classroom, 24 kids. We'd have to split it in 50% one day, 50% another day. Another consideration is what's best for students and staff. So obviously we talked about health and safety and social distance, but we're here for teaching and learning. Teachers have to teach, kids have to learn. So there's academics, there's social emotional learning, and obviously we have to address the mental health issues. And so that also goes into our decision making for our opening plan. And then consistency. And the last bullet, it really is states the current situation in New Jersey and across the United States. It's difficult to maintain consistency in the current environment with the restrictions that are imposed, but also the fact that, again, we want kids to be safe. So the environment with the pandemic is making things a little shaky, but then also the restrictions that are put on top of us to adhere to make things even harder. And so we want to make sure that we have a model that we can deliver every day. We can deliver every day throughout the whole school year, if in case we have to go in this model all year, a hybrid model. And then I have choice. And again, you'll see I crossed out part of my presentation because it changed between this morning and at 1 o'clock today, where the governor announced that he would allow parents to opt out. So in our community input form, that was probably the largest response. Do I have the right? I feel you have the right, but the state has parameters and laws that say that you weren't allowed to do that. You would have to homeschool your child. But here now we're in a better place than we were a couple hours ago, because now we are allowing parents to choose to have their kids be schooled by the Millville Public School District, but remotely. And it's called an opt-out. So we're going to mobilize and have paperwork sent out to folks, and they have that choice to have their child receive instruction in via remote learning. And we needed that because of the fact that the principals and staff, we have to create schedules and busing and cafeteria schedules. All that goes into that. So it's really important that this news came out now, so we can allow that to happen. And so that's a good thing for us right now, that parents will have that option. Again, this is not myself that decided this. This was the state statute that did not allow it, but the governor lifted that today. So again, parents are allowed to opt out of in-person learning, and we'll be sending out information tomorrow. So let's begin our Q&A. We're going to have questions, and I'm going to begin. Let me find my questions. My first question is going to be, I'm going to stop sharing. There we go. And I'm a little new at this, so pardon me. And I'm going to look for my questions here. So my first question is for Dr. Moore, and I'm going to get to that if I can find it. Let's see. You have that? Okay, good. So, Dr. Moore, you're up. And the question is, I got you. I got to get Dr. Moore on here now. So hello, Dr. Moore.
Well, how are you?
Well, for the pause. So the first question is directed at you, and it's, will students return to face-to-face instruction in September?
Thank you very much for asking that question. Yes, all students will return to school on September 3rd with a hybrid A-B daily rotation. The schedule will be full days. Students will not be dismissed early. The students will be divided equally by grade level into groups for rotating in-person instruction. We will adjust this rotation in the second week, of school, which will be the week of September 14th, to accommodate a 4-day week, with Wednesday being a full remote day each week. We are working to ensure that students remain on the same schedule throughout the year or until we return to full face-to-face remote learning. So your students will always be in school on either Monday and Thursday or Tuesday and Friday. And before you ask, Mr. Trongone, we are working very hard to make sure that families remain together on those A-B schedules. So if you have more than one child, all of those children will go to school on the same rotation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Moore. So there's an A group and a B group?
Yes. So if you are in the A group, then you will go to school every Monday and Thursday. If you are in the B group, you will go to school every Tuesday and Friday, and Wednesday will be a remote day for everyone.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Moore.
You're welcome.
Okay. Next up, a question to our business administrator, Mr. Rich Davidson. So I'll get pretty good at this. I'm going to get Mr. Davidson on the line here. There he is. How you doing, Mr. Davidson?
I'm doing well. Yourself, Mr. Trongone?
Good, good, good.
Yes.
So my first question revolves around transportation. So what are the changes to transportation for the 2021 school year?
Okay. For this year, the first thing we want to attempt is we want to keep transportation as simple as possible, and we want to make it as similar to transportation as previous years. So in saying that and going to this A-B hybrid schedule, we're expecting a decrease in ridership for this year. So that would allow us to socially distance on the school buses. We're going to try and maintain the same start times and drop off and pick up times. So it will be very similar to parents and students, just with fewer students on the bus.
Okay. What about facial covering?
What we're going to do is we're going to attempt to equalize our bus routes and get it down to the CDC guidelines and the guidelines that's spelled out in the road back plan released by the state of New Jersey. So we're only going to require facial coverings if we fall over those guidelines. So if we can get it down to the 22 students, 1 student per row, they will not be required to wear a face covering.
Okay, good to know. Thank you, Mr. Davidson.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Next up, and I'm navigating this new program we have here, but so I'm going to go to our Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, Ms. Donna Myers. Hello.
Good morning or good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So my question for you, Ms. Myers, is will staff, students, and visitors be screened prior to entering the building?
Okay, so we are definitely looking at screening our staff and students. Currently, I'm looking at various ways to accomplish that task. So I've met with some companies along with our IT department. We looked at touchless thermometers, we've looked at infrared cameras, kiosks, and also explored, currently we're using a check-in questionnaire here at Culver, so we're also considering that. We're working with our school physicians. I did reach out to both Dr. Patel and Dr. Houston to get their medical input. And of course, we will follow the guidelines from the CDC and the Department of Health. So yes, there will be some type of screening that will be determined based on our exploring our opportunity, our options.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Myers.
You're welcome.
Okay. I'm going to go back to Mr. Davidson again. because he's going to be busy throughout the, oh no, I'm going to go, yeah, I'm going to Mr. Davidson
Still
with
here.
food services. Mr. Davidson, what will breakfast and lunch look like this year, the 2021 school year?
So we will be providing food service to both all of our in-person and our remote learners for this year. For our in-person learners, that will be some combination of, meals in the classroom, meals in the cafeteria. It will vary depending upon the capacity of each of the schools. So each school may implement a different meal plan for both breakfast and for lunch, but we will be offering for all those individuals. We're going to move away from the buffet style and the family style offerings and move to more pre-plated and more pre-packaged items for the safety of the students.
Okay, what about those students that are on remote instruction, or it's their day for remote instruction? What are we doing about that?
So our remote learners will still have the opportunity. We're trying to figure out right now how to best get those meals to the families and to the students. We're looking into possibly being open in the evening for meal pickup. We're also looking at potentially sending meals home on the bus with students who are at dismissal. And we're also looking at the potential of actually during the day to provide meals as well. So
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Get on my camera.
I'll take Mr. Davidson out. So, Dr. Moore, I know that you have been meeting with the principals I think the principals and you've been meeting more than on a weekly basis, correct?
Correct.
Part of the planning, making
Yes.
sure kids are safe. And so there's a lot that goes underneath of this question that I'm going to ask you, because again, of their due diligence, looking at all the different avenues of practicing social distancing, making sure our kids are safe. So what or how will social distancing be carried out in the school hallways and the classrooms for September?
So very similar to a lot of your shopping experiences, we will be having a lot of signage in the hallways so that students are reminded to socially distance. We will have corridors that are designed as one-way corridors in the buildings where that is possible. In the buildings where that is not possible, students will be wearing masks throughout the day. Students will be wearing masks in the hallways as they pass one another. Also, with us going to the AB schedule, that will reduce the number of students who are in the school building and thereby reducing the number of students who will be passing. When we are in our cafeterias and classrooms, we will also be practicing social distancing so that the students will be separated by 6 feet. In the classroom, as your picture just showed, that will mean basically every other desk. And that will be the same thing in the cafeteria. There will be designated space for students to sit, and they will all be separated. The last thing I think I want to say is that even in classrooms, we are removing furniture in the classrooms and removing objects so that we can maximize the space for our students.
All right, thank you. And thank you to you and the principals for their due diligence. Because again, I started in July, but I think almost every time I've come in contact with you, you've had another meeting with some stakeholder group in the district in regard to all the nuances of a school opening in September. So thank you. But I still have more questions for you.
Okay.
But not at this moment. I want to turn it over to our facilities director, Mr. Ryan Cruzan. So Ryan, I have two questions for you. The first one is, in the New Jersey Department of Ed roadback plan requires schools to have procedures regarding cleaning schedules and how buildings will be disinfected. Tell me what we're doing to meet this particular indicator of opening schools.
We've made some changes and we've added some procedures to our normal cleaning. We've changed our normal disinfectants to disinfectants that are approved by the EPA for use on COVID. We're going to have custodians on staff during the day that are assigned to disinfect frequently touched spots, such as push bars, push plates on doors, handrails, restroom fixtures, things like that. And our normal nighttime cleaning will be done using only disinfectants that are approved by the EPA for COVID. And at night, we'll disinfect all surfaces desktops, door hardware, restroom fixtures, anything in common areas.
All right, thank you. The second question, same thing, the road back plan calls for hand sanitizers in specific locations. And can you please elaborate on that measure, like the locations of the hand sanitizers and whatnot?
Sure, we'll have sanitation stations at each building entrance, and we'll be asking students, staff, and visitors to sanitize their hands when they enter the building. We're also going to have an alcohol-based sanitizing station in every single classroom for teachers and students to use through the day. And we're going to have disinfecting wipes available in each classroom for teachers' use and in the older classrooms for students to use to keep their own areas disinfected.
All right, good. And then we're going to have that. We're going to have all those materials. That seems to be a nationwide shortage in those particular chemicals. We're going to have that for September.
We have sanitation stations in place in the warehouse already for entranceways. We already had those before this happened. We have the sanitation stations for classrooms on order, and our supplier has told us that we'll have them by September.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Krizan.
Sure.
Okay, and then again, I'm navigating through all this. I'm going to ask our Assistant Superintendent for HR, Ms. Donna Myers. You're up again.
Okay.
And the questions for you, Ms. Myers, is: will students and the teacher be required to quarantine if someone within the classroom is diagnosed with COVID-19?
Okay, that's a great question. There are a lot of different parameters for that. It will depend on how the classroom is set up or where the student, how far apart the desks were. If we have barriers around the desk, and how high are they, how long the kids have been exposed to each other. So there's a lot of things to consider. It's not just a cut and dry. The Cumberland County Department of Health is working with the CDC on guidelines to determine when should we definitely quarantine. So I have been in touch with the Cumberland County Department of Health, and I will certainly work through them. They are also going to make a recommendation that they have someone from the Department of Ed to be available on our call when we have to make such decisions regarding large groups.
Okay, thank you. And so the second question I have for you, Ms. Myers, is: how will we support medically compromised staff?
So we're not going to change anything that we currently do. We already have protocols in place. We are going to follow the Families First Coronavirus Act along with the Emergency Expanded FMLA Leave. And I will be happy to meet with my staff individually like I do now, and we can determine whether or not they need an accommodation or they need to go out on a leave. So it will be based on an individual basis.
All right, thank you. And one more thing, you've also started a program with the county with contact tracing with the county and our nurses, correct?
I did. I've completed that program, and another nurse in the district is also taking that. And we did get notification from the county that we would be working through them to do contact tracing.
All right. Again, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Myers.
You're welcome.
Okay. The next up is our executive director for special education, Mr. Steve Matus. I have a couple questions for you. The first is that the IEP have to be followed during periods of remote learning or any form of hybrid teaching mode.
Well, I thank everyone for taking the opportunity to take part in the discussion today and for asking the questions regarding special services. So in regards to the IEP, as we all know, the IEP is a legal document, so it's required that all school districts follow the IEP to the greatest extent possible in regards to the accommodations, modifications, the entire education plan, including related services. So we have continued to do that. And when we reopen in the fall, we're going to be looking at creating virtual learning plans for each of our students to see what each student would need for this hybrid model, and to look at what type of compensatory services that we would need to provide after going through 3 months of direct remote instruction and with the summertime.
Good to know. Second question is the district accepting referrals and evaluating students under the federal and state guidelines?
Yeah, so we are currently evaluating students during the summer. following the CDC guidelines and state guidance when it comes to opening up camps and working with students. So we are currently providing initial evaluations and reevaluations to meet all those requirements. We submitted the necessary paperwork to the Department of Health for their approval. So yes, we are currently accepting any parent requests for a child study team evaluation.
All right, thank you. Last question for this round is: will students be provided district? You're not up. I'm done with you, Mr. Matus.
I could answer that one if you need.
No, you don't want to answer this one. We're gonna have our rather august leader in technology, Mr. Dan Wright, answer this question.
Thank
Will
you.
students be provided a district device for their remote learning?
Yes, in grades K through 8, we will be providing a Chromebook, a Dell Chromebook for the device to use. And grades 9 through 12 will be provided with a laptop.
Okay. What about access? We've been working together on access at home. Can you go a little further on that, Mr. Wright, what we're doing about access?
Sure. We're looking at 2 possible options for access for those that currently do not have access. One is a hotspot using cellular services, Wi-Fi hotspot, and the other is the Comcast Internet Essentials package, which will provide internet access through Comcast.
Okay, thank you. So we know that's going to be something that'll be different than the springtime, where we're going to make sure that every kid, because they had their own device, we're going to try to standardize that across the district, correct?
Correct. That is correct.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wright. All right. So thank you. So that concludes our first round with questions that I had. And then we had that community input form. I'm watching the chat line too, so we'll try to get to a couple questions regarding the chat line. But I want to honor people's efforts on responding to the community input form last week. And so I'm going to start off again with Dr. Moore. And Dr. Moore, the question I have for you is, this is from the public. The public question was, will there be a more structured schedule for instruction?
Yes. So when we went out on remote learning in March, I've been telling one, it was just like there was a house fire. We grabbed everything we had, we ran out of the house, and we worked with what we had. We now have an opportunity to plan for that instruction. So yes, we are going to be working to create schedules for teachers, where teachers will have direct lesson time. They will also have virtual office hours for parents and students, and they'll have time for small group instruction with their class based on students' needs. We're also working to streamline the platforms that we're using. A lot of teachers were using various platforms, and it was very confusing for some parents, particularly if you had more than one student in our school system. They were operating with Google or Remind or Class Dojo, and we're going to be streamlining the options that we have to deliver instruction. In addition, we are creating a library of videos for parents in Spanish and English, or parents and or students. How do you log into Google Classroom? How do you get to Pearson Next? We'll be creating videos. How do you log into IXL for all of our parents to be able to go to that library and to view those quick how-to videos. And I'd just like to say one thing about the AB schedule, because some might be concerned that we have Mondays off often. If we go through the AB schedule all the way throughout the year, there's 1 day difference between the A's and the B's. So we may later on make an adjustment to accommodate, but there is 1 day difference based on our school calendar.
All right, good. And then you mentioned the platform is going to be consistent too?
Yes, so for pre-K to 2, we will be using Seesaw, and for 3 through 12, we will be using Google Classroom. And there will be information coming out to all families about how to access both programs.
All right, thank you, Dr. Moore. I have one more question.
Sure.
And this is from the public. What will physical education and recess look like in the elementary schools?
Good question. Thank you. So we'll be adhering to all social distancing requirements. with phys ed and with recess. We're going to stagger the use of the playground and the playground equipment and establish frequent disinfecting protocol. If there happen to be 2 or more classes out on the playground, depending on the size of the playground, they must be 6 feet apart, as in the school building. And we are going to be eliminating direct contact with equipment that we would normally be using in phys ed. So there will be a minimal use of equipment and frequent cleaning. The students will get phys ed and they will get recess because they need both.
All right, thank you, Dr. Moore.
You're welcome.
Okay, and now I'm going to go to, back to Mrs. Myers again. A couple questions her way. So Mrs. Myers, this is a big one. Will students and staff be required to wear face masks?
So students and staff will be required to wear face masks when social distancing is not an option. So we're going to make sure that, in our classrooms, our desks are 6 feet apart, and kids in the hallway, that would be one of the areas that, they definitely would need to put their mask on. So when the 6 feet distancing is not an option, yes, they will be required to wear a mask.
Okay. And we've been checking, that's across the state too. That's the guideline that we have to follow, correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Second question, what if your child can't wear a mask due to health issues? And will they wear something that identifies that they do not have to wear a mask?
Okay, so if we're going to follow the same procedures that we do now and the same laws and regulations. Some students have IEPs, some have accommodations, and we receive medical documentation for us to create those plans for them. So those kids who do need accommodations or IEPs, we will absolutely work with them and their family. We're not going to identify those students. We're not, they have the right to privacy through those plans. Of course, their teachers and anyone who spends the day with that student would absolutely know what the student's needs are, just like they are any regular year when we're here.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And then the other question, I'm going to save a question for you on the chat regarding the distribution of masks later. So they have a couple people in the chat that'll be coming up, but I'm not going to ask that now. I'm going to go back to Dr. Moore. And the question is, if my child is attending school 2 days a week, will they meet the 180-day state requirement?
Absolutely. So those days that students are not in school, they will be receiving assignments and independent work through our various learning platforms. According to the state, and in actuality, hours of instructional time are not just defined by the time that the student is spent in front of the teacher or in front of the screen, but time that's engaged in the standards-based instruction. So students will be provided with standards-based assignments to meet the needs of the students on their varying levels. And that will be completed either during the day or later when they are not in front of the teacher. Students should always participate, though, in the check-ins, the discussions, and other communication that the teacher will be using. And we also recognize that all students may not be on at the same time. So we will be working with synchronous and asynchronous learning and giving students an opportunity to participate at a later time if that needs to be.
All right, good. Thank you, Dr. Moore. I'm going to switch over now to Mr. Matus and a special ed question for you.
All right.
So the question is, will special education students be returning to school for more days during the week than other students in the district?
That's a good question. It's something that we spent a lot of time thinking about, exploring, putting the team together, and contacting our special ed attorney. We would like to have all students in 5 days a week safely, but unfortunately at this time we would not be able to bring in any of our special needs students a greater number of days than what's already being outlined under the district plan. The district plan is taking into consideration the CDC guidelines, the state guidelines, and at this point in time, ethically and legally, we would just have to comply with that for all of our students, including students with IEPs. However, this does not mean that we cannot provide additional supports for any students with an IEP during the school day or outside of school. Once we return to school in September, all the case managers will be assessing kind of every student's need, and there's proper virtual support plans that we put in place. We're also going to be putting together in the month of August a COVID-19 special education steering committee, which will include parents, community members, and staff as well to help address some of the needs as we go forward.
All right, thank you, Mr. Matus. And this is the last question in regard to the public comment, and it's to Ryan Cruzant, Mr. Cruzant. And this was also in the chat a couple times. Will classrooms have fresh air ventilation?
They will. In fact, by building code now, we've always been required to bring fresh air into classrooms. The required air exchange rate works out to about 4 complete air exchanges per hour, which is higher than you'll find in other kinds of commercial buildings. Even in our older buildings that have the window air conditioners, there's either a unit ventilator or an exhaust fan for each classroom that removes stale air and brings in fresh air. In some classrooms, we're going to have to reconfigure how those units work a little bit. Right now, they cycle on and off throughout the day, and we're making those changes now to make sure that we're constantly, continuously bringing in fresh air to every classroom.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cruzant.
Thank you.
So that concludes those questions, and now I'm going to go to the chat, and we're going to have a few. We're going to go. We'll get about 45 minutes in on this particular live stream. And the question, I'm going to throw it to Ms. Myers, and the question is concerning PPE. Is the district going to supply PPE to staff and to students?
So the answer to that is yes. It will not be on a daily basis. We have ordered masks to give each staff member 1 or 2 per year. However, we are going to honor a lot of people have their own masks. So we will honor that. We will also have extra masks on hand in case someone forgets one or someone breaks or it's lost or damaged in any way. So we will have extra for the staff as well. I'm looking at also what kind of protection maybe some of our medically disabled staff may have. Someone may have a medical problem that requires something different. So the staff will absolutely work with every staff member in that regard.
Okay, thank you. I have one more. And will substitute paras be able to work through Kelly Insight?
So I actually have a meeting this Wednesday with Kelly to discuss the substitutes and how we're going to move forward with bringing them into the school, making sure that they also follow the guidelines that we put in place for our regular staff. So I will meet on Wednesday and get those answers then.
All right, thank you, Ms. Meyer.
You're welcome.
I have another question, and I'm going to answer it. Will there be school-based testing for COVID? And will student teachers be required to be tested for any reason? What is the protocol? Right now, there is no protocol for testing. There are other outside organizations that are asking for it, but right now, under the guidelines, the district would not be facilitating or accommodating any type of COVID-19 testing. It's just not part of the plan at this moment. So I wanted to answer that question. I did have a question for Miss Dr. Moore. Apologize, Dr. Moore. There was a question about A and B, and it was staffing. Will there be different teachers for A days and B days if I'm a teacher in one particular homeroom?
No. So teachers will be teaching on A day to half of the group of their students, and they will be teaching on B day to the other half of the group of their students. We're going to be working on getting teachers to have activities where they can include both groups on both days, maybe a morning meeting or an afternoon check-in. So students will have an opportunity to see their peers on a more daily basis. But those teachers will be teaching, the same teacher will be teaching on A day and B day.
Okay, I have one more question. It could be for you or Mr. Wright in regard to the preschool and devices. What's the plan for technology devices at the preschool level?
Thank you. So I'll answer, Dan. And Dan, if you'd like to chime in, by all means. We are looking to get devices also for our preschool children. We are looking to get the Chromebooks that have the touch screen, so our students are able to work more tactily. Dan, do you want to chime in, or did I answer that question sufficiently?
I think you answered sufficiently. We are trying to address that issue as we speak.
Thank you.
The next question I have for both of you too is there a process for picking up devices? Will there be a process in August to pick up your device, or will that be when kids come in school?
Well, I think that depends on when we get the devices in. But it would be if we can have parents pick them up in August at the end of August before school starting. That would be great. If we don't have them in time, then we would distribute them through the students. We are also ordering cases for the Chromebooks to be carried back and forth to reduce damage to the Chromebooks.
Okay, so that's something that's in the works. We're going to make sure there's a facilitation of devices.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was the question.
And
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me go back here. I'm doing my best to navigate these questions for our parents and community. The next question was dealing with before and after school care. And right now, we're one of the few districts that is providing a daycare through the DCF. And so we're exploring that. So when folks are saying, oh, are we going to provide a before and after school care? That is in the works. There's nothing definitive yet. Again, we're learning what's going on right now with the at the early childhood center, the family childhood center. And so when we get grounded, what Mrs. Burns talks to us about how that's facilitated, but also talk to our folks that run the program, the Latchkey program, we'll be providing details of how we can facilitate that. Okay. So if you give me a second, I'm going to ask one more question. Mr. Davidson, it might be a silly question, but I don't think it is. Will students be able to pack a lunch? Because I think if you're bringing things in, is that illegal to do that, or we're planning on you can bring your own lunch? I couldn't hear you.
Sorry about that. Students absolutely have the option to bring their own lunch if they choose to.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you, Mr. Davidson.
You're welcome.
So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to close out with, there are many questions that we have here. We're going to sit back and digest them all and see if we might have another session to disseminate that, or have some type of forum where you can go and get answers to these questions. And they're all good questions. Again, they're talking about music classes because, different, you're using a reed and you're blowing out. What's going to be the social distance for that? So that's all going to be meted out along with the athletics program. Right now, the athletics program, according to the NJSIAA, says that the fall season will start on September 14th. That's the news that we have as of today, July 20th. So the fall sports season starts September 14th, and then the games don't start until October. And so, again, we're getting more details. We'll have Mr. Lagamba involved with that, answering some of your questions in regard to athletics, and also we'll have some answers in regard to extracurricular activities with the latest information that'll be brought forth to us in regarding this particular pandemic and the opening of schools. So I want to thank you for your questions. This recording will remain available, and this transcript will be shared with all district administration for review, and so we can get that information back to you. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we have a board meeting on August 3rd at 7 o'clock, and we'll report out a more detailed plan for opening of schools in September. And then at the county level, we'll submit that plan to the county by August 14th. But we will communicate what that plan will be in regard to the daily rotation and the information that parents need to know about coming into school, like the rotation of the days, the transportation issues, the cafeteria issues, and then, you know, all that goes into teaching and learning. There'll be more details coming within the next couple weeks. So again, I want to thank you, and I want to thank the folks from Millville for me being here for 3 weeks, and I hit the ground learning. I don't know if I think I was always running, but I'm learning, and I'm learning some great things about Millville. Have some great people here, great kids, and everybody has all good intentions in mind. And I really appreciate that. I've been in other school districts, and I want to tell you that this is definitely an outstanding community in regard to what we have to do for our kids. So I want to say thank you, and stay tuned for another update in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.